I just realized I was in a holy place. And we were interlopers, of course. We had the audacity and the hubris to think that somehow we could capture some of what that place means in the history of the world.
You're a passionate historian. I mean, you have produced more content around World War II than most, obviously. What was it about the picture, the famous picture of the young boy in Poland that caused you early on to want to learn everything you could about the Holocaust?
Oh, I did not know anything about the Holocaust until I was in fifth grade. I was 10 years old. The war at that time was essentially the stuff of movies and TV shows like Combat or something like that. I know that my dad was in the war. He was in the Navy in the Pacific. The moment of finding out about what the Holocaust was it was a rite of passage. It was like a slow motion entry into adulthood. It was having a window onto a degree of human behavior that made absolutely no sense to my 10-year-old brain. And the photograph is a very famous photograph. It's about very early in the war in Poland. And I saw a young boy who was probably my age, who was holding up his hands as he was rousted from his home in Poland because he was a Jew. I'm not saying that was the moment where I wanted to became a lay student of history, but it was a bit of a crush. It was a bit of a hard, bitter lesson of humanity. It slowly became a little bit more of an adult that day. I grew up in Oakland, California. We learned about civil rights. We learned about Martin Luther King. We learned about George Washington Carver. We learned about Rosa Parks. We learned about an awful lot of good news about the progress of civil rights and race in America. But how is it that at the age of 10 years old, I first learned about the Holocaust and yet had not ever been told about the 1921 event in Oklahoma in which Black Wall Street was burned down by white Oklahomans and 10,000 Black Americans were ushered to the city limits and told to leave. I mean, imagine never learning about the Holocaust. What kind of gap would that be in our sense of world history? And without an awful lot of other lessons there, we have gaps in our own sensibility of American history.
The World at War TV show, the TV newsreel footage, the talking heads, Laurence Olivier, how did that impact you?
That was huge for a couple of reasons. One is because it really was an encyclopedia. It's like staying at home one day and reading an entire encyclopedia about one subject. Part of it was I did not know of the vast scope of the war. It sounds like a stupid thing to say, but World War II covered an awful lot of the globe. I did not know about so many of the particulars. So historically, I learned a great lesson. But there was something else in there that would absolutely knock me out, and that was the presentation, the storytelling. That it was nonfiction, it was talking heads. It was archival footage. It was animation of maps and graphics. And it was riveting from an entertainment perspective. My head sort of exploded as far as how you could tell a story. You didn't even have to know the language. You could read the subtitles and get it.
Describe the emotion of walking on Omaha Beach and why you were so overcome and what you ended up doing.
Well, I was not working that day. You know, we had already we had shot Saving Private Ryan in Ireland and in England. And it was a very, very tactile experience for all of us. It was an uncomfortable movie to make, but we couldn't wait to get to work every day because of no one had touched that subject matter in quite a long time. And we were shooting it from a kind of like under the helmet perspective as opposed to something grander. You know, there's not a lot of big florid speeches in there. There's a lot of guys slugging through and running, being scared out of their minds. So after that experience, the movie was shooting the sequences there, and I lingered. Well, I walked the entire length of Omaha Beach from one end to the next. And just knowing everything that had happened there, I got to the very end, and I was wondering if there was going to be any sort of sign of who we had, of who we were. At the very end, there's memorials that are scattered all along. There's memorials to this outfit. There's memorials to these sailors. There's a memorial to the Canadians. There's memorials all scattered along, and you stop and you read each one. And at the end of it was this plaque on this concrete retaining wall. I'll butcher what it says, but it said, "This is dedicated to the 29th soldiers of the 29th and and it said companies A, B, and C of the 5th Ranger Battalion, and that was us. We were Charlie Company of the Rangers. And to see that there after we had gone through this kind of thing, it was kind of rocked me, made the hair stand up in the back of my head. And walking back down, back to the very famous cemetery there, I just realized I was in a holy place. And we were interlopers, of course. We had the audacity and the hubris to think that somehow we could capture some of what that place means in the history of the world. It turned out we sort of did, but at the end of the day, all you can do is kind of like bow your head in understanding of the great providence that had happened there. I don't think anybody who has some semblance of historical knowledge, or even without it, can go to a place like that. And they are scattered all over France. They're scattered all over Europe, and not take pause there and think, what would I have done if I had been a 19-year-old kid there on that day?